I wanted to talk a little bit about speech. It's been a theme, I think probably of my Bodhisattva Breakfast Corner talks a bit, because I've really been working with this the last couple of years. A few years ago now, I was giving a series of talks on ethical conduct, and we were covering the 4 non-virtues of speech, which are lying or speaking untruthfully, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle talk. And we were talking about the virtuous actions of cultivating the opposites. So we spoke about, telling the truth as the virtuous action, or being truthful, speaking truthfully as the virtuous opposite of the non-virtue of lying. And one woman raised her hand and she said, if I tell my daughter that she's the lazy, worthless slob that she is, I'll never get to see my grandchild. I can't tell her the truth. I was like, well, yes, you'll get into trouble. But is that the truth? I mean, this is the question we have to ask. And I see that it's a very common misunderstanding about truthfulness is, okay, PolitiFact reports that 80% of well-known politicians' checked statements are false. And 42% get a pants on fire rating, and he is praised for being so honest. Right? We have this kind of disconnect between what is actually truthful speech and what is opinion. That's really one of the things. What is opinion? And so, as most of you know, I'm Southern, and we have a particular regional problem with this issue of truthful speech. Not intentionally, really, but if someone comes in with a bad, bad hair, mismatched clothes, we wouldn't say, well, we would say something. We'd say, oh, look what you're wearing. You're so creative. But it's a total put down. And if we follow it, she's so creative, bless her heart, well, then it's a total put down. Or something like, that boy can't open his mouth without putting his foot in it. Now, if I said that at the dinner table about my brother, nobody would really think twice about it. It would just kind of blow. And it's not that harmful. But if somebody was calling for, if not that harmful, if somebody was calling for a reference, a job reference, and I said, oh yeah, he's a really good worker. Now he can't open his mouth without putting his foot in it, but he's a good guy. Now what have I just communicated? But what is the truth about that? That's just some opinion, and it's a figure of speech. But its capacity to bring destructive result, for me, karmically, because I'm not paying attention to my motivation, and what kind of, I'm not paying attention to the affliction in my mind that would make me want to turn that statement, much less the effect that it has on that job interview. So I think this is not at all uncommon. So when the Buddha talked about his speech, when he was speaking of right speech, he talked about 4 qualities: that his speech was truthful, that it was useful, it was spoken at the right time, and it was spoken with a compassionate motivation. So this combination of things comes together to actually make a very kind of pure, perfect speech. If the things that we're saying are all of these things: truthful, useful, spoken in a truthful, useful, spoken in a timely way, and with a compassionate motivation. And so I think what this truthfulness is calling us to examine is to see, when we speak the truth as we know it, how are we telling the story? And what's our motivation behind telling that story? I once called my mother, bless her heart, on telling a story that she and I, a situation that she and I had experienced together, and she was getting huge laughs. But the more she told the story, I was like, Mama, that's not what happened. She said, hush, it's a better story this way. And she's right, it was a better story that way, but it was not the truth. So we need to bring in our mindfulness and our introspective awareness to be aware of what we're saying, how it affects the environment that we're in. And then also, as Buddhists, with some concern about how the way I'm speaking is affecting the karma I'm creating. So I turned to the little brown handbook for writers as a resource for how do we discern the difference between fact, opinion, belief, and prejudice, because we don't always know when we are spouting off. So this is what they say for writers. If you're going to have an assertion about something that you're going to be writing about, you need to know these different ways of expressing a view. So a fact, they say, is verifiable. We can determine whether it's true by researching the evidence. So that should be clear. This may involve numbers, dates, testimony, and so forth. And yet, we've talked about, when we've looked at different kinds of ways of viewing things, we see that sometimes we have what's it called? A similitude of a direct perception. A similitude of a direct perception might be that this boy can't open his mouth without putting his foot in it. Right? We saw him make a verbal mistake. Somehow, maybe that was our direct perception. Heard it. But somehow in making this statement, we think we're stating fact when we're not. It's not true at all. Okay, an opinion is a judgment that is based on facts. It's an honest attempt to draw a reasonable conclusion from factual evidence. Okay, so that's an opinion, but it's still an opinion, so I identify it differently. A belief is a conviction that's based on cultural or personal faith, morality, or values. This is a great example. Statements such as, capital punishment is legalized murder. They're called opinions because they express viewpoints, but they are not based on facts or other evidence. They're not really verifiable. Now, we may have strong opinions about that, and we may be able to find facts that can back that up. But just as a blank statement, capital punishment is legalized murder, carries a lot of weight, a lot of emotional value. But it's not backed up or supported just blanketly, by anything, right? But we would do that. We would do that to express our conviction. And then this last one, I found very interesting too. Another kind of assertion is prejudice, which they call a half-baked opinion based on insufficient or unexamined evidence. Example, women are bad drivers. Now, how often is something like that asserted as fact? How often do we ourselves say something like that, expecting that we're speaking truthfully? When in fact, it's based on nothing. It's not testable. Oh, no, it is testable. It can be contested and disproved on the basis of fact. And this is where we really get into trouble. We form prejudices or accept them from others, family, friends, and media without questioning their meaning or testing their truth. Now, why does this matter? We had a nice talk about this in Spokane the other night when we were talking about the value of cultivating our compassionate minds and hearts. When we speak with compassion, when we speak mindfully, thoughtfully, truthfully, appropriately, with good timing, the effect brings peace and harmony where we speak. It can resolve conflict. It can dissolve misunderstanding. It can bring a feeling of trust and kind of a sense of stability even in a world where people never know where to turn or where to trust. When we speak out of our opinions, our beliefs, and our prejudices and kind of throw them into the air, we're contributing to, I want to say, an environment of violence in some way. And this is my opinion. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I will say that. But it does contribute to an unsettled, my experience is that it contributes to an unsettled environment. The reason the violence came to mind is I was shocked one time to hear His Holiness the Dalai Lama say, "You did not grow up in a compassionate society." And I was like, what? I've been thinking about this for nigh on to 20 years now. You did not grow up in a compassionate society. He wasn't blaming us. He was like answering somebody's question and, explaining something. It was a short sentence and a long answer to some question. But it just hit me like this. You did not grow up in a compassionate society. I'm like, wow, we didn't. We didn't. Where this kind of speech values were taught, were promoted, or even really understood. So that's why it's important to me. I realize that I contribute to this tremendously, partly because of my regional family training, and try to work against it. I'm not so successful, but I do try. And so I thought it's just useful in this time when, now that we're watching the news a little bit more in this political season, I'm shocked at what people say, I'm shocked. And I see that one thing we can do in our wish to bring peace in a chaotic world is to cultivate the opposite of that, to cultivate a kinder, more mindful speech, and see how we can contribute to a greater good.